Well, hello again. Welcome again to another reading. As we've been going through all these articles from these old books. And the book we're in right now is Wrecked but Rescued. That's the title, and it's actually from the series, the Gospel series, from back in the 1800s. And this is the seventh book in a series of 12 books, I believe there were. And some say there was more in the series, but as I come across them, I've been just sharing them with you. Now, I usually do these videos ahead of time, and I was going to do this one for back in, or I should say forward in August, but I probably will post this one quicker, and because I'm getting quite a few ahead of myself right now. So the title of this article is Homeward Bound, or The Heart Won. So with that said, let's just read our article. Far away on the trackless oceans, many, many miles from the sight of land, a ship is on her homeward passage from Australia. She is the bearer of many homesick, weary ones, but none so anxious as the sight of this of home is Jessie from a little town of Fife. If I'm pronouncing it right, it's Fife. Years ago, the iron hand of poverty had forced her family to sell their dearest loved little farm and leave their native land in search of employment over the seas. With breaking hearts, they bade adieu to all that was dear to them, and after many years of hard toil, they are now homeward bound, purchasing their little farm in Fife. Far up the bush lay the bodies of the valued wife and mother of the family in the cold ground, and Jessie had early to take upon her the care and toil of her father's young family. She had left Scotland in blooming girl in her teens. Now she is returning, worn out by the rough life in the bush, and a fatal disease, too, having laid its restless grip upon her still youthful form. But Jessie heeded little to racking coughs and gave her weary days and sleepless nights. And often she would smile and say, I shall be well when I get home or hame. She had the accent, and see the hill Fife again. Her father's strong arm carried her daily on deck, where she laid watching the waves, and bore her outward towards the desired haven, and where the roughness of the weather or her own weakness made it impossible for her to be on deck, she would watch through the intense yearning for the first sight of land, and at times she could see the outline of the hills of Fife from her cabin window. As days passed on, the sick one got more weary and faint, and her father saw with sorrow that she must be taken to a hospital as soon as they get to land. It was hard to convince Jessie that this was the necessity, that deceitful nature of the disease, giving her fitful glimpses of strength and a little relief from the coughing, binding her to the fact that she was so very ill. And when at length she did reach Edinburgh, she could scarcely be persuaded that for a time at least she was unfit to continue the journey. In the great grief of friends, left her in a ward in an infirmity, while they pursued their journey without her. I was in the habit of visiting the infirmary, and there I first saw Jessie, the very day she was left there by her friends. I had just entered the ward and had been greeted by kindly smiles and welcome looks of recognition from some of the suffering ones, when my eye rested upon one who through the stranger at once awakened my deepest sympathy. She was sitting up in bed, her face, which was intelligent and pretty, glowing with the excitement, almost of despair, as she rocked herself to and fro from time to time, and then threw herself exhausted on the pillow in a paroxysm of weeping. After her words or two with some of my old friends, I quickly crossed the ward where she laid, and after a little tender soothing, she told me thoughts through her tears, the story just related. Even now that they were clasping my hands in almost childless weakness and saying, "Oh, you'll get them to take me home. I must see the hills of Fife again," with the promise that I would speak to the nurse about her and see what could be done. I left her a little comfort. As I went, I called the nurse aside and asked her what the doctors thought of Jessie's case. "Oh," she said, "both lungs are gone and no hope of recovery. And my own thoughts is she will never be off that bed." A strong desire filled me to return to the sad, lone sick one and tell her of Christ. I had listened to her tales of sorrow and the seemingly unable to do anything but sympathize, and I had failed to tell her of the only one who could satisfy her weary heart. I remember I had some grapes with me, some grapes with me, which I had brought for another patient. So I went back to her and put them on her pillow, saying, as I did so, "Jessie, do you know that Jesus loves you?" "No, for if he did, he would have taken me home to Fife and not left me among strangers. Did anyone ever speak to you about Christ in Fife?" "No." "Did anyone in Australia ever speak to you about Christ?" "No." "Well, Jessie, perhaps God sent you to this hospital to hear about his beloved Son, who loved you so much that he died for you, and he wished you to be with him forever in the land far more beautiful than the hills of Fife." She shook her head in the incredulous and said, you never saw my home." "Jessie, no, Jessie, I have not. I have, nor have I seen the home that God has prepared for those who love him. But I read about it, and I know it is more beautiful than any home on earth. Here you would be spared a little, have many a weary suffering day, Jesse, but there God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and they shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Revelation 21:4. Visiting hours were over, and having told her of him who could save her and make her happy forever, I left her a little testament in which I had marked for her some passages and came away. It was several days before I could again visit the hospital. I went in prayer that the Lord would give me the right words to meet Jessie's case. I found her much in the same state as before. Her father had been to see her, and she had again passed through the disappointment of being left behind. I felt it was best to try an interest in her with something outside of her own sorrows and circumstances. So I spoke to her as I could to a child of Jesus, of whom she seemed quite ignorant. Soon she was melted by the tales of what he had suffered for her, and through her tears and softly, I never heard of such love. I thought there was no one could love me like Jamie, she said, pointing to a little ring on her finger. He gave me that when I left Scotland, and he's waiting for me all these years, and he came in today to see me, but I never heard of love like Christ. It's more than the earthly love, far more. Well, I rested my head upon my hands and left my tears their own way, while I silently thanked God that the exceeding beauty of Christ had won the sorrowful heart. I had felt powerless to help her, but God had given her soul to grasp at once the most blessed of all gospels, for it was the person of the one whom had died for her and had captured her heart. As I was leaving the ward, she called me and said, "Will you write home and tell them I've got one now who is more to me than the hills of Fife?" "Oh, Jamie," she whispered as the color rose to her cheeks, "though he knew I love him well." Then, after a moment's thought, she said, "No, the Lord will give me strength to write myself, for none of them know Christ." It was a week before I saw Jessie again. The great change had passed over her face. It was calm and sweet, but the lines of death were on it, and her voice was feeble. She seemed not, as usual, to notice as I entered the ward, and I had to lean over her and whisper, "Jessie, dear, you're very weak. You're very weak." I gotta get to it here. "Today," and she said, smiling, "I'll soon be home." "Not to Fife," she added quickly, as if fearing I might misunderstand her, "but to see her face. Oh, tell me more about him." We had a blessed hour together. I shall never forget it. We feasted upon our meditations of him who is altogether lovely, the chiefest among 10,000s, and I felt we should never meet again, for I was to leave Edinburgh for a time. I almost feared to tell her, for she seemed to cling to me, but she answered, "He is enough. He saved, and there he is satisfied." She seemed exhausted, so I left her for a few moments to speak to the suffering ones at the other end of the ward. As I was going out of the door, I turned around to take a last look at Jessie. I saw she was asleep. Her sweet face, like the piece of a chalice, a marvel, a smile upon her parting lips. She was homeward bound, and involuntarily went up to her bed and gently pressed to her last kiss upon her pale forehead. A few days after I had left home, I got the message from the sister of the Lord to say Jessie has gone home full of joy. Reader, do you know anything of the Christ who first saved and then satisfied Jessie? He had saved you, or is your heart bound up with some earthly love or the same cherishing home to the exclusion of Christ? Well, the earthly friends may disappoint and the earthly home pass away from your hand, and where then? You are left desolate, for you have no Christ. And one said, "Give me Christ, and I have everything, and give me everything without him, and I have nothing." Well, there is nothing real, or lasting, or abiding but Christ. Oh, if you have him, not come to him as a lost sinner, come to him now. But perhaps you may say, "Christ has saved me, but he has not satisfied me." I see you have not Christ, as Jessie had, for he saved and then he satisfied. And why is this? Do you know anything of earthly love, of love that is satisfying with its object and seeks nothing outside of that object for its happiness? To be in the presence of the Lord, one, to hear the voice of the loved ones and watch for the smile of the loved ones, and to be silent in the overpowering joy of that love. What you want is to have your hearts captive by Christ, and to be so overcoming by his exceeding beauty, like the Queen of Sheba when she visited Solomon. There is no more spirit in her, like Jessie to say, "I never heard of such a love." Rest not, dear soul, in saying, "I am saved," and know it, for the Christ who saves can satisfy and will satisfy you if you give him your undivided heart's affections. You cannot have Christ in the one hand and have the world in the other. You must have the world, you must have it without Christ. He can have no place in your ballrooms or your operas or your concerts. You go there without him. once said to me lately, I know I am saved, but I can enjoy those things too. Can you? I answer, there you must be very unlike him. Not, nor are you satisfied with them, for Christ does not satisfy me without such things. Oh, if I knew for 1 hour what it was to have your heart filled with the satisfaction with Christ, and you would be seeing satisfactions from the amusement of the world that has crucified him. The end of these things is death. You cannot serve God and manna. And just a little thought. Faith. Faith is not the sense of sight nor reason, but a taking God at his word. It is the eye of the soul. It was not the numbing foot nor the strong arm that were of use, but the eye, however dim and weak, and directed to the bronze serpent. Looking to Christ and Christ only is the answer. Well, that completes the reading, and I hope you enjoyed these little stories. I'm blessed by these things. But the love of Christ, if you once come to really know who Jesus is and what he has done for you, you will be filled with such love for Christ that nothing else matters. Nothing in this world can satisfy. Only Christ. Bye for now and have a great day. God bless.